What's going on, guys? It's Greg here, aka NYPrepper. I wanted to just do a quick video on the SHTF bolt action rifle and what type of features you want to have in an SHTF bolt action rifle. There's all kinds of bolt action rifles on the market, and I want to show you my SHTF bolt action rifle, or one of my SHTF bolt action rifles. And right now I have it stripped down. I had this rifle covered in camouflage. I wrapped it with camo form tape, and also I rubber banded some polyester or nylon leaves. So I'm in the process of re-zeroing this rifle and double checking my iron sights, and I thought it would be a great time to talk about what features you want to have in an SHTF bolt action rifle. So this is a Ruger M77 Hawkeye Alaskan, and it's chambered in 300 Winchester Magnum. Now, I have customized this rifle myself a little bit and upgraded it. Main thing being the trigger and the stock. So as soon as I got the rifle, I swapped out the stock for a premium stock, and I upgraded the trigger to a Timney trigger. So I want to just go over some of the main features of this rifle and why it's an excellent SHTF bolt action rifle and why I chose it for that purpose. Now, I also use this for hunting. I'm going to take this with me on my Idaho elk hunt soon, and I use this for deer hunting and bear hunting here in the Northeast in Pennsylvania. But before I get into the features, I want to talk about why you want to have an SHTF bolt action rifle. Well, a lot of guys these days, they prefer semi-automatic rifles like AR-15s, and those are definitely great to have, and you should have one in your arsenal, some kind of semi-automatic rifle, either an AR platform or AK or some type of reliable semi-automatic rifle platform you should have in your SHTF arsenal. But in my opinion, the SHTF bolt action rifle could be your most important firearm. And the reason why is that it gives you long range capabilities that a traditional battle rifle doesn't give you, like an AR-15. This 300 Win Mag Ruger can produce the same amount of energy at 1,000 yards as an AR-15 can produce at 25 yards, okay? So this has huge penetration capabilities, anti-material capabilities. I can use heavy bullets, and this rifle can propel those heavy bullets at very high velocities, which creates a lot of energy, a lot of power, a lot of penetration. And that's something you might need during SHTF, all right? Whether you're hunting, you might have to hunt some big game, you might have to stop a vehicle, okay? When it comes to stopping vehicles, you need big projectiles to do a lot of damage to engine parts like radiators, etc. So an SHTF bolt action rifle, in my opinion, is as critical as an AR or some kind of semi-automatic rifle, if not more important, okay, because it gives you the ability to hunt at extended ranges, which will increase your odds of hunting success, all right? That's why people today hunt with high power scopes now, and back in the day, people used to hunt with iron sights, and people realize that hunting with iron sights is tough because it's very difficult to get close to most game animals. But also, a bolt action rifle is much more reliable than a semi-automatic battle rifle. Any kind of semi-automatic firearm has more parts that can fail, all right? You have springs, you have gas tubes, you have pistons, you have all kinds of stuff that need to be working all perfectly in order for the firearm to function, okay? Any one of those little parts fails and your firearm is out of service, okay? But a bolt action rifle is extremely rugged and extremely simple, okay? Yes, you can't dump 30 rounds in half a minute, but in SHTF, you might not need to do that, okay? You might need to be more surgical sometimes, all right? And you might need more accuracy and more punch and more range rather than just blasting dozens and dozens of rounds, which is only going to give away your position to everybody within several miles unless you have a really good suppressor. So the simplicity and the reliability, the power, the penetration, in my opinion, make an SHTF bolt-action rifle mandatory for all preppers. And you really need to put some thought into your SHTF bolt-action rifle. Don't just pick anything off the shelf. Really spend some time researching and finding the right rifle for you, okay? But a bolt-action rifle is just super simple. It's operated by a bolt, all right? So you literally just chamber each round by cycling the bolt, all right? There's really not much that can go wrong here. You know, there's a firing pin in the middle of the bolt, and it's just a super simple design. For SHTF, simplicity and reliability are king, more so than capacity and firepower, in my opinion. So the first thing that you may notice when you look at this rifle is that it's stainless steel. You definitely want to have a stainless steel rifle because, for common sense purposes, if you are going to be using your rifle during SHTF, you don't want to have to worry about rust or corrosion or anything like that. Not so much on the outside, like on the receiver or on the outside of the barrel. That's not a big deal if you get some rust on that. But if you get rust inside of your barrel, in your bore, that's going to affect your accuracy, okay? So number one thing is you want to have a stainless steel barreled action. So you want the receiver to be stainless steel, and you definitely want your barrel to be stainless steel. If you can't get a stainless steel receiver, it's not the end of the world, because if you get a little bit of rust in your receiver, it's not going to affect your accuracy or anything, but your barrel should be stainless steel, all right? Because if you get rust inside of your barrel in the bore, it's going to affect your accuracy. So that's the number one thing right there that is going to eliminate about 50% of the rifles that you have to choose from, is you want it to be stainless steel, all right? Number two, we're talking about SHTF, right? We want to have some kind of iron sights, all right? Why is that? Well, if something happens to this scope, this is an excellent scope. I love it. I've shot at 1,000 yards with this scope, with this rifle. Awesome scope, very precise, very rugged. I've had it for a couple of years now. I've put a couple hundred rounds through this rifle and no issues with holding zero or any kind of quality issues or anything. However, even the best quality scope like a Night Force or something like that, a $3,000 Vortex Razor, is not immune to gravity and physics, all right? If you drop your rifle and this scope lands on a rock or something like that, or just even right on the ground, like over here on this concrete pad, if I were to just drop this on the scope right on that concrete, doesn't matter what kind of quality scope you have, chances are it's going to damage it somehow. Either it's going to throw off the reticle, it's going to mess up the turrets, it might break the glass, it might break the gas seal, all right? There's gas inside of scopes that keep moisture from penetrating them. You're going to mess it up somehow. In the best case scenario, nothing will happen, or you might just throw your zero off. Worst case scenario, you damage the scope beyond repair. So in that situation, if we're talking about SHTF, you want to have another way to, you know, fire on your target, okay? You want to have another option for you. You don't want to just rely on an optic, okay? So you want to have a bolt action rifle that has iron sights, and that's why I chose this particular rifle, because it comes with these very rugged iron sights, okay? This rifle is made for hunting in Alaska, all right? And when you hunt in Alaska, you got to deal with dangerous game like brown bears, moose, animals that can kill you. And you always want to have iron sights in that type of a situation. So this has iron sights, and a lot of rifles these days sadly don't come with iron sights anymore. It's really unfortunate, but a lot of gun companies, they're trying to cut costs any way that they can and maximize profits. And at some point they realize that nobody uses iron sights that much anymore. So they figured, why put iron sights on the barrels? It's more expensive. So unfortunately, it is hard to find a good quality rifle with iron sights. Back in the day, in the 60s, 70s, 80s, even through the year 2000, a lot of rifles had iron sights on them, bolt-action rifles, including Winchester Model 70s, which always came with iron sights. So if you can't find a rifle that has iron sights, then you can always have a gunsmith install them. All right. What they do is they solder on this little front sight, band that goes over the barrel, and they solder it on, or, kind of like welding it on. It's not super expensive. You just need a good gunsmith, and a great company that makes iron sights is New England Custom Guns, and they're out of New Hampshire. And they make these types of rugged front sight posts like this, and rear sights that can be just, welded on or soldered on. So check them out. If you can't find a rifle with iron sights, check out New England Custom Guns, and, their sights are going to probably cost you about $200. But it's definitely worth it, guys. You definitely want to have iron sights on your rifle. Moving on from that, I have a Mauser style claw extractor. This is a controlled round feed. And what this allows me to do is basically cycle the rifle in any angle, any position. And it just guarantees reliability. Push feed is great, but for SHTF or, any type of situation where you actually have to operate your rifle under difficult situations and difficult conditions, you want to have that controlled round feed. The Mauser style claw ensures extraction and reliable feeding. Another thing too is you want to have a synthetic stock, but also you want to have a aluminum bed block, and the bed block keeps the stock rigid so it doesn't flex too much. And this is actually a Hogue stock that I got for this rifle, and it has a aluminum bed block that goes through basically the whole center of the stock, from this area over here all the way up to the fore end. So from the buttstock to the fore end, there's a aluminum skeleton that keeps the stock rigid. You definitely want to have it free floated so you have maximum accuracy. You don't want to have your barrel contacting the stock. And also you want to have some kind of a rail so you can mount a bipod. Now when it comes to scopes, you don't want to have too high of a power scope. If you have too much magnification, it's going to be difficult for you to use the scope at close distances. So I have a 2.5 to 15 power scope, which is very good for multi-purpose use. I've shot this rifle at 1,000 yards. At 15 power, I can easily see targets at 1,000 yards. And at 2.5 power, I can easily shoot targets at 25 yards. So you don't want to have a super high magnification scope. You want something like 2 to 15 power or 3 to 18. I wouldn't go more than 20 on the high end. And on the low end, I wouldn't go more than 3, in my opinion, or 3.5. Because once you go above 3 to 3.5, it's really useless at close distances when you need to make close shots like 50 yards away or something like that. So you don't want to go too high on the magnification. The rings, you want to have steel rings. Forget about aluminum. Aluminum is junk. All right, steel rings and steel base. If you're going to go with a Picatinny rail, you want to have a steel rail, not an aluminum one. Everything's steel. All right, stay away from aluminum. Your trigger, you definitely want to have a good trigger. This one breaks at around 2.5 pounds. It's a Timney trigger. And also, you definitely want to have a threaded barrel. Right now I have a muzzle brake on this one, but I'm waiting for a suppressor, and the suppressor is going to go on here. So threaded barrel is important. So this way you can put different types of muzzle devices like a flash hider or a suppressor, which in my opinion is critical for an SHTF firearm. Another thing too is with the barrel, it's very tempting to get a super long barrel. If you're just a long-range shooter, bench rest shooter, or you hunt in open prairies, then of course you want to have a long barrel to maximize velocity from your cartridges. But if we're talking about just general purpose rifle, you're going to be in different terrain, whether you're in a forested area, an open area. You don't want to have a super long barrel that's going to make it impractical to carry. So this one has a 20-inch barrel, which is a little bit short for a 300 Win Mag. I would like to see this at 22, but I would definitely not go more than 24 inches. And even 24 inches, in my opinion, is a little bit too long for a general purpose rifle. You want something you can easily carry all day long. So with a 20-inch barrel, once I put a suppressor on here, that's going to add an extra 8 inches. So that's going to turn this 20-inch barrel rifle into a 28-inch barrel rifle. So you need to think about that. If you have a 26-inch barrel rifle and you put on a suppressor, after the suppressor's on there, you're talking about 32 inches of barrel length. So, have fun carrying that in the woods or up mountains. It's not going to be fun. So keep the barrel length reasonable. Okay, don't go too short, don't go too long. In my opinion, the sweet spot is between 20 and 24 inches, because remember, once you put a suppressor on that barrel, it's going to be a lot longer. And you don't know how long you're going to have to carry this rifle. You may not be just carrying it for a couple minutes. You may have to carry it for days and days. So you want it to be comfortable. You don't want it to be super heavy. You don't want to have a super heavy contour. You don't want to have a super thin contour either. This has like a medium sporter contour. And with the scope on, I think this weighs around 11.5 pounds plus the bipod. So I think that's a reasonable weight. And another thing too about your SHTF bolt action rifle, in my opinion, you should not get a detachable box magazine. You should have an internal box magazine, all right, a hinged floor plate. And the reason why is, if we're talking about SHTF, what happens if you lose your magazines or something happens to it? You don't want to be reliant on a magazine to feed your rifle, all right? In my opinion, an internal box magazine is the best way to feed a bolt action rifle. It's also a slimmer design. You don't have this big box sticking out on the bottom here, which can snag on things. So you're not going to really gain much by having a detachable box magazine, unless you're in a situation where you're in a static position and you plan to stay in that static position for a long period of time and you're not going to really be traveling anywhere. Then maybe having a detachable box magazine makes sense, because you might have to engage multiple targets and multiple threats. So in that situation, if let's say you're close to your home and you set up an overwatch position near your bug out location or your bug in location, and you're just overwatching an area, then maybe a detachable box magazine would make sense in that situation, because if you do lose your magazine or you break it or something happens, you can always go back to your house and resupply. But if we're talking about a general purpose SHTF bolt action rifle, I prefer an internal box magazine, or actually hinged floor plate design. Okay, that's what I prefer. So that's really important. Now, going back to the scope, one thing I forgot to mention was you definitely want to have an illuminated reticle on your scope, because SHTF, you're not going to have the luxury of choosing when you have to use your firearm. All right, you may have to use your firearm in low light or no light conditions. And even if you don't have night vision, but if you have an illuminated reticle, you can still use your scope in low light situations or even no light situations. If you have a good moonlight out, or there's some other type of ambient light, you can still use that scope. Like, let's say you have a long distance throwing flashlight that you mount to your rifle, much like the type that coyote hunters use. You know, you could use your scope without night vision as long as you have an illuminated reticle. So those are some important things. Now, finally, I wanted to leave the most important part to the end, which is the caliber or the cartridge. What cartridge should you select for your SHTF bolt action rifle? In my opinion, I would not go lower than a 270 Winchester in terms of power and diameter of the bullet, okay? So you want to have, in my opinion, at least 2,700 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. You need some kind of cartridge that can generate 2,700 foot-pounds of muzzle energy. A 308 would probably be the absolute minimum that I would go. And really, with a 308, to get close to 2,700 foot-pounds of muzzle energy, you would probably need a 24-inch barrel. But 308 or 270 would be the lowest I would go. 6.5 Creedmoor, that's a little bit light. Remember, we're talking about SHTF, all right? You're not going to have the luxury of possible follow-up shots. You're not going to have all the luxuries that you have now. You need something with enough punch that can damage materials, that can put things down quickly. And in my opinion, something smaller than a 308 or 270 with less energy and lighter bullets with a smaller diameter is just not going to cut it for SHTF. You know, we're talking about multi-purpose use here. You know, one day you may have to use your rifle for anti-personnel purposes, okay? Another day you may have to use it for anti-material, all right? And then another day you might use it for big game hunting. So if you have something like a 6.5 Creedmoor, you're kind of limited to smaller bullets, lighter bullets. Even though they have a higher ballistic coefficient, they don't have that punch that something like a 308 or 270 would have. If you do want to go with a 6.5, I would go with a 6.5 PRC if you're really dead set on that, and that's something that you really like and you're good at shooting. But you want to stick to common calibers and common cartridges. That's why I selected the 300 Winchester Magnum, because the 300 Winchester Magnum is one of the most popular Magnum cartridges in America, Magnum rifle cartridges, if not the most popular amongst the hunting community. You know, 6.5 Creedmoor, 6.5 PRC, 300 PRC, some of these newer ones, you know, 6.8 Western, 270 Winchester short mag, all the short mags, you know, those types of cartridges are great, but they're not as common as a 270, a 308, a 3006, a 7mm Rem mag, 300 Winchester Magnum. In my opinion, I would select from one of those. 308 for people that are recoil shy, start with that. 270, 3006 for people that are a little less recoil shy but don't want to go all the way up to the Magnum. And then if you're comfortable with recoil, I would consider a 7mm Rem Mag or a 300 Winchester Magnum. Those would be my 5 cartridges that I recommend for people to use in an SHTF bolt-action rifle. Yes, they're a little bit old, and yes, there are newer cartridges now that, you know, have crazy ballistics coefficients and, you know, retain better energy at, you know, ultra long distances, but you want to keep it simple, okay? SHTF, simplicity is your friend, okay? You don't want to start picking all these exotic cartridges or newer cartridges that are not so common, all right? For example, around here in the East, in Pennsylvania, if I had to scavenge ammunition, I know I can easily find 308, 270, 3006, 7mm Rem Mag, 300 Win Mag. I know that most rural households probably have one of those types of cartridges in their house somewhere, you know. But, you know, 6.5 PRC or something like that, 6.8 Western or even 6.5 Creedmoor, still relatively new, you're going to have a harder time to find that kind of stuff, you know, if we're talking about SHTF scavenging ammunition. Another advantage to these cartridges, especially the 308, 3006, and 300 Win Mag, is that they use the most common projectile in the United States, which is the 308 diameter bullet, okay, 0.308 inches in diameter. That is the most common rifle caliber bullet, okay? It's been the most common for probably 50 years, okay? And the 3006 was a standard issue cartridge for World War II. It was chambered in the M1 Garand, and then later on they invented the 308, which was popular for a while, and then they switched to 5.56. But you know, you won't have any difficulty finding 308 caliber projectiles, you know. And let's say, for example, in my situation, I have a 300 Win Mag. Let's say it's SHTF and I scavenge some 308 ammo, but I don't have a 308, which I actually do. But let's say I don't have a 308. Doesn't matter, okay? I can pull the bullets out of those 308 Winchester cases and I can hand load those bullets into my 300 Win Mag cases because they use the same diameter bullet, okay? If you have a 6.5 PRC, you know, that's going to be a little bit more difficult. So stick to stuff that's common, all right? 308, 270, 3006, 7mm Rem Mag, 300 Win Mag. You know, all of those cartridges have a lot of punch. They're very common. They have good long-range performance. Of course, there's better options out there nowadays if you want to, you know, shoot a 2-inch group at 1 mile. You know, I'm sure that there's something out there for you. But for general purpose, we're talking about general purpose here. We're not talking about bench rest shooting. We're not talking about long-range steel competitions. We're not talking about ultra long range shooting. We're talking about general purpose from 0 to 1,000 yards. Most of your shots being between, let's say, 100 yards and 700 yards. All those cartridges I mentioned are perfect and the best choices, in my opinion, for an SHTF bolt-action rifle. So that's pretty much it, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care, God bless, and don't forget the 3 Ps. Prepare, practice, and persevere.